everyone. If we can just get everyone seated. It's my great honor to introduce you to Jorgelina. She has been working with the Ethiopian Wolf for over 20 years. There's actually less than 500 left in the world, and so thanks to Jorgelina, we are grateful that they are still here. So if you could please give her a big round of applause. Thank you.
I love Ethiopian wolves, and I want to save them from going extinct. And I'm sure many of you here are also passionate about them, or at least curious about them, because you are here today. I'm happy that you choose to come to my talk, because I really want to tell you why the Ethiopian wolf is so unique. And even though very few people has had the chance to see one in the flesh, the Ethiopian wolves inspire people all over the world that are helping to protect them, because they know that the world won't be the same without the Ethiopian wolf. And there is nothing like the Ethiopian wolf. And little I knew about them when I came to Ethiopia for the first time in 1997. Then the Ethiopian wolves became the topic of my doctoral research, and I've been at the core of the Ethiopian wolf conservation program since. And I discovered many things throughout these years about the mysteries of this wolf that lives in Africa, only in the highlands of Ethiopia, and in no zoo anywhere in the world. And the mysteries of a country like no other that has its unique alphabet and ancient calendar and is the home of coffee. So I want you to discover these mysteries and to know why and how we can protect and we can save the Ethiopian wolf. So I'm from Argentina. I study biology in Bariloche, in North Patagonia. This is 12,000 kilometers away from where the Ethiopian wolves live. And who would have known that day when we were riding the horses after a severe storm that I will work to protect the Ethiopian wolves? And only in March, I was riding a similarly stocky horse in Ethiopia, in Ras Dashen, the highest peak at 5,200 meters. And a storm of ice covered everything in a white mantle. And to me, that image was very emblematic. I couldn't take a photo because I was freezing. But my beloved Andes and the highlands of Ethiopia have a lot in common. And in this small world of ours, here we are together in California because we also have something in common, and it's this passion that makes us care for animals that are so rare and mysterious like the Ethiopian wolf. And I chose to be in Patagonia rather than in other more prestigious universities because I wanted to be close to what is my source of passion, and is wilderness. Vast, wild places full of animals and plants and waters and rivers and nature running its own course. For me, nature has been a source of well-being and a source of knowledge. And to many of us, nature has an intrinsic value. And protecting nature might be our key for sustainable and fair societies in the future. So we all value nature and we value wildlife. And we value wildlife maybe from different points of view and according to our experiences. So today I want to talk about why I value the Ethiopian wolf, and that comes from a point of view of a scientist, from the point of view of a conservationist, and from the point of view of the Ethiopians that live with the Ethiopian wolves, and they see nature through a different lens. We might differ in our values, but there is one thing that is crucial. We will only care for what we know. And so learning about the Ethiopian wolf and teaching about the Ethiopian wolf has been one of our main activities. I didn't know much about Ethiopian wolves because they were not in the textbooks when I studied in Argentina. So the trip of discovery for me was fascinating, and I want to take you through that, and I want to introduce you to the Ethiopian wolves. A wolf in Africa? Yes. The ancestor of the Ethiopian wolf colonized the highlands through land bridges in the Red Sea some 100,000 years ago. That was the end of the glaciation, and the colonizers found a place with vast moorlands and grasslands full of rodents. Yeah, so Ethiopian wolves eat almost exclusively rodents. This one here is a giant mole rat. Weighing around a kilo is a most desirable meal, and 10 times the size of a grass rat, which is more of an appetizer. So actually, many of the prey of the Ethiopian wolf are as rare as the Ethiopian wolf or more. For example, the giant mole rat is a fantastic creature. I know. With the eyes at the top of their head, they can spot birds of prey when they go in paranoid bursts, gathering food around the entrances to their subterranean homes, and they live only in the Valley Mountains. Ethiopian wolves and giant mole rats and many other species evolved in Ethiopia in isolation, because the Ethiopian mountains are not communicated with any other mountains. So they found special solutions to the problems of living in these landscapes that are open and where summer and winter happens in one day. And that makes them unique. There is nothing like an Ethiopian wolf. And for Ethiopian wolf, family life is very important. But the reasons why this is the case is not the same for other social carnivores. For example, group hunting. If you are a rodent catcher, you don't want other wolves around you disturbing your prey. And actually, Ethiopian wolves develop very interesting techniques to catch rodents unaware. And some of them more like the stalking of cats, actually. So Ethiopian wolves are good. It's good to be alone for hunting, but they are very social, and you may wonder why. Only the dominant female in a pack will breed, but everyone else will help to raise their litter. The pups go out of the den when they are 3 weeks old, and when they start weaning, other animals will bring food to the den for all the pups. And when everyone else is foraging, someone stays by the den babysitting. So the dominant pair see the burden of parenthood diminish because there is so much help. However, larger packs do not have more pups, or the pups fare better. So you wonder, why are they helping? They are highly social, and they spend a lot of time greeting and playing, and they will do this in the evening before they go to sleep, and then in the morning before they go out patrolling. In a line with the dominant female at the front, they will cover all the boundaries in the park of the territory every day, scent marking. This is the communal activity that has more benefits for the Ethiopian wolves. With so little space left and so much competition for them, they occupy every inch of Afro-Alpine habitat, and they form a tessellated mosaic of territories. So this is a good thing. Being in families for this is good. And when they go scent marking, they also pass on a lot of information in the form of chemical codes, like the hormonal profile of every individual. So it's interesting that in one place, all the packs synchronize the mating. Over a short period of time, of 2 weeks, all the action happen. And sometimes some sneaky mating with neighboring males to ensure a bit of genetic mixture. Because of that, otherwise, inbreeding could be a problem. So let me take you back to 1997. At that time, the Ethiopian Wolf Conservation Program was a small group of people with a common passion. Claudio Siliero, in the photo there, who was the reason why I went to Ethiopia and soon became my husband, he had a mission to save the Ethiopian wolves from a horrible disease that in 1992 killed most of the animals that he knew by name and he had followed for 4 years. That was very shocking, and he had to leave Ethiopia and couldn't come for a few years because of the political situation. But he sent some funds, and his loyal field assistant, Idris Ebu, continued the field work during that hard time. And many of the people in that photo are still working for EWCP, and Idris Ibu is now the project manager. So our family grew, and EWCP grew, and today is a fantastic group of some 50 people, counting the horse keepers, the veterinary assistant, the education officers, the wolf monitors, the wolf ambassadors. And they are working across all the species range in 6 populations. When I started working in Ethiopia, we didn't know much about them outside Bale. And by the way, the black areas are the only areas that are suitable for Ethiopian wolves. So as soon as that was safe, we visited all the other mountain ranges, and we found wolves in almost all of them, small populations, but they were present. So today we work in every place where the Ethiopian wolves are present. That makes me very proud and hopeful, but the truth is that challenges are many and testing. So I want to tell you today about 2 main challenges that we are facing and how these are turning into opportunities for more effective conservation. This is an Ethiopian wolf killed by rabies. We have a dedicated team of wolf monitors that follow some 30 families, and they will very quickly pick up when there is a carcass in the cases when, as soon as domestic dogs infect Ethiopian wolf with rabies or canine distempers, and these are the domestic dogs that live around Ethiopian wolves. When that happens, we start detecting carcasses very soon. 1, 2, 3, 4, many can be found over a short period of time. And this is very distressing. And when that happens, we collect samples, we determine the cause of the disease, we get permissions, and off go our EWCP team to vaccinate the Ethiopian wolves. So in the lifetime of the program, we have detected 8 of these outbreaks, and in 5 occasions, we vaccinated them. And this may sound like a disheartening story, but it's also difficult to know what difference we made with our interventions. But really, without vaccinating some 4,000 domestic dogs around the Ethiopian wolves every year, and without the education and the vaccination of the Ethiopian wolves, we are sure that these outbreaks would have been more frequent and more lethal. So the battle against the disease is not over, and we are not hiding out. So over the last year, we worked very hard to develop a plan that would allow a more sustainable solution, and also with the involvement of the better engagement of all the stakeholders. The first thing is to entice the political will. So this year, we gathered together with the main stakeholders, and we revised actually our strategic plan for the Ethiopian wolf conservation, which was done in 2011. We reviewed the plan, and we were happy to see that 50% of the priority actions will be doing good progress, with EWCP leading much of it. But we also realized that unless there is an integrated plan to protect the diseases, to control the diseases, the Ethiopian wolves will not be secured. So at the end of this meeting, the government committed to this plan, and the plan includes continued vaccinating domestic dogs, moving domestic dogs from protected area, but also an oral vaccination campaign that can prevent the wolves getting infected on the first place. We are ready to go. We are very happy. We worked 3 years testing a vaccine for Ethiopian wolves, an oral vaccine for Ethiopian wolves. We identify what is the bait that the Ethiopian wolves prefer, and we could say that the vaccine is safe and efficient. So we are ready to go. And this is how an Ethiopian wolf can be vaccinated by himself. This is from a camera trap. So oral vaccination is less stressful. We don't have to handle the wolves. It's cheaper and easier to scale up. So we are really looking for funds to start this fantastic campaign. Based on our science, we target 40% of all the wolves. If 40% of the wolves are vaccinated, we can prevent outbreaks in a 95% chances of preventing them. So that is where we are going now. This is the Lanta. This is a small range and it's very close to my heart since I first visited with Claudio in 1998. In August last year, the wolf ambassadors, which are members of the local communities that are our eyes and ears in the remote places, they told us of 3 carcasses that they had found of Ethiopian wolves. In the past, we know of diseases in the Bale Mountains. This is the first time that we are able to detect it in other populations. As soon as we determined that rabies was the cause, we vaccinated a surviving pair. And this is all that is left of what we knew was a population of some 20 wolves, and we are keeping a hopeful eye on them. Disease can easily put a population into the extinction risk, and particularly if they are very small. And actually, the habitat loss is the main problem. It's the problem underlying all these other problems. In the history of the project, we have witnessed 2 local extinctions. In areas that became too small to sustain more than a small group of Ethiopian wolves. It's not only agriculture that is encroaching into the mountains, but also the land of the wolf is communal land that has been traditionally used for grazing livestock, to collect firewood that people use for heating, for cooking, and for lighting, for everything, and collecting grasses that it can be sold also in the market. So every effort is needed to protect the Afro-Alpine. If there is no Afro-Alpine habitat, there are no Ethiopian wolves, and no other action we can take will save them. It'd be interesting to visualize that all the habitat of the Ethiopian wolves will fit within the Yosemite National Park. So this is small, I know, and it's a bit depressing, but again, there are good news, because across the board there is an interest to protect Afro-Alpine areas. So now 80% of all that area is protected in some form. This is another thread, sorry, I forgot. Roads everywhere, new roads. So national parks are expanding. The regions are creating new protected areas, and also the communities are getting organized and creating their own community-based conservation areas. And so there is hope, but of course there is not always the financial and technical know-how. So EWCP is working in all these new protected areas. We are building capacity and promoting sustainable uses of their resources. Protecting the Ethiopian wolf is not just protecting the most rare carnivore in Africa. It's protecting an ensemble of endemic species like these beautiful species that they all exist only in Ethiopia. And also resources that are fundamental not just for the wolves, but for millions of Ethiopians and far away. Because these are sources of water that create many big rivers. One of them is the Blue Nile, one of the main tributaries of the Nile. So we cannot just witness as the wolves of the Lanta disappear. So we are convinced that translocation of the animals moving Ethiopian wolves to rescue populations that are very small or to rescue populations that are declining can save the Ethiopian wolf, and it will help to protect these fantastic environments. For example, Mount Choke is the main catchment for the Blue Nile, and this is where the conditions for the reintroduction of Ethiopian wolves are better. So I think that we can rescue small populations, and that is something we are ready to do. We have a plan for this vision, and it has many steps. We need to survey the habitat for the condition. We need some modeling to see how different translocations may affect the source population or the population that receive the wolves. And we need to work with the people to see if their tolerance of Ethiopian wolves or other wildlife is ready, or if we can promote it. So all of this achievement wouldn't have been possible without this fantastic group of people. And it's sad that some of them cannot be here, but having a visa to come to the USA is not getting any easier. So I'm representing all of them here, and I wish one day they are coming. Our leader is Eric Bedan, there with the binoculars. He has the expertise and the knowledge to coordinate a project that I think you can imagine is very complex logistically and technically. Alu Hussein, he was in that first photo of EWCP. He's our senior monitor, and he's a source of inspiration for everyone, and particularly the new monitors that are learning and following his footsteps. Feka Dulema, he's EWCP #1 fan, and since he was young, he insisted he wanted to be part of EWCP. And now he is the coordinator of all the North Ethiopia operations. And for the last 3 years, he's been implementing innovative micro-enterprises with the local communities that include planting wild grasses, keeping bees, or cooperatives that produce and sell fuel-saving stoves. And he's a master of public relations. Gebello is from the younger generation. He is now controlling all the monitoring operations in North Ethiopia. And he recently had the opportunity, with WCN support, to receive a diploma in conservation practice in the University of Oxford. And then he went into doing a master. He studied how the Ethiopian wolves adapt their lifestyle when they are forced to coexist with many people, livestock, and dogs. We want to support EWCP staff to grow in their professions. This is the photo of Girma Shete. I took this photo before he defended his PhD in Leiden University in the Netherlands. He achieved this huge milestone in his life with the support of EWCP and WCN as well. We really care about our staff, and really securing their jobs and a fair financial deal for them is at the core of our desires, and securing that core funding is always a challenge. And I didn't have time to tell you, but working in the mountains is really hard. It's not always comfortable. So high quality tents and clothes, field camps, and reliable cars, they are all needs that are recurrent and essential. So I salute the Ethiopian Wolf Conservation Program team for their passion, WCN, and all the others that so generously are helping us so that we can continue doing what we are doing, and also trying new things to save the Ethiopian wolf, because together we can save the Ethiopian wolf. Thank you.
I think we have time for a couple questions before we move on to Robyn.
That was really great.
Thank you.
So the Ethiopian wolves, do they have quarters? Are they able to meet up with the other packs, the other groups of wolves in the other mountainous areas? Is it continuous, or are they kind of inbred in their own, the 5 populations?
All those populations, the 6, are completely isolated from each other, so the wolves cannot move by themselves. In theory, according to the books, inbreeding should be a huge problem, but really it isn't, or at least there are no signs of inbreeding that we can see. And actually the largest population, the Bale Mountain population, has the lower genetic diversity. And the other populations have genes that are not present in the other ones. So there are some nice genetic diversity distributed. I think if we can manage Ethiopian wolf as a meta-population, and even maybe mix a little bit more the genes, that could be a good thing, because when we lose a population, like for example when we are losing the Lanta, maybe we are losing genes, variations of the genes that are not in the other ones. So I think it's time really we start treating all of the population as one and trying to promote diversity, for example, among other things.
Hold on.
Do they have predators besides man? Are they affected by, like, pups are taken by any species of eagles, or do they have any not predators, but do they have any?
An eagle could take one, but no, I think they are. The social living is, they are protecting their pups very well. They are starting to compete more so with golden jackals. And we have seen that when the wolves are more disturbed, they cannot live in family, they don't have this time to be social, and then golden jackals are chasing them, they're starting to fight. So we are very concerned, particularly when the wolves are disturbed, and we are starting some new studies to see what is happening, in which ways they're interacting, and that will be another challenge, because the golden jackals that we happily eat rodents and live there as well.
I think we have time for one more question. Anyone? Or you had one before.
The work you're doing is great. I have a question about the oral rabies vaccine. It sounds like a brilliant idea, and is that something that's going to be used in other areas to control rabies?
The oral vaccination?
Correct.
Yes, the oral vaccination, we want to work in all the populations. So it's been very successful to control rabies in other places, in USA and in Europe. So actually something that we wanted to do for a long time, but there are difficulties, mostly political, to move ahead. So this, for us, this moment is a triumph. And yes, we can do it in all the populations. And then it has to be continued, because after 2 years or so, the animal needs the vaccine again. Yeah. Thank you. So now it's my pleasure to introduce Robyn. Robyn is doing amazing work in Peru to protect the spectacled bears. The spectacled bears are amazing, but also the place where they are working is in the dry forest of Peru. That's one of the most endangered habitats in the world. So we are also very happy to have her here because she's a PhD student and she had a baby a month ago. So welcome and thank you for the effort.
Is it that one, right? Thanks, everyone. It's a real honor to be here and with my new daughter. So, Paddington Bear. I'm sure most of you here have heard of Paddington Bear. Everyone here of Paddington Bear? Yes. And if you haven't heard of the book, you've probably heard of the movie that just came out, Paddington. But I wanted to share with you what the real Paddington is like. Charismatic, funny, likes to play, likes to relax, similar to the movie. But the reality is there's less than 5,000 bears left in South America and in the world due to habitat fragmentation, agriculture, and illegal land trafficking and poaching. So what this is doing is it's not providing access to certain key areas for these bears, and they're actually starving to death. But with all of your help here, we can help keep bears like this little cub Martina alive for the future and in the wild. Unfortunately, we know so little about their ecology, and they're called spectacle bears, but also known as onion bears from the rings around their face. They look like they're wearing glasses. They live from Venezuela all the way down to Bolivia, but this is their typical habitat. It's really dense cloud forest. It's hard to see. Basically, it's like living in a fog. So trying to actually observe them, study them, understand what their needs are, their ecology has been really challenging for many. Luckily, 10 years ago, we found a small population of bears in this very unique endangered ecosystem, the dry forest of northern Peru, which runs the coast of all of Peru. And so luckily, we were able to observe these bears in the wild, and they have these identical facial markings, and so we're able to put names and know which bear is which. So their environment is really extreme, and this is the dry forest. Not what people think of Peru. People think of Machu Picchu and big Amazon. So this isn't somewhere you would expect to find bears, black bears with lots of fur, and black in particular. But it's not just challenging for them, it's challenging for us. We have no water, we have no food, we have to carry everything in up those big cliffs, and so that's been a tough job for all of us. But the benefit is we have views like this. I mean, we have unlimited visibility, and these bears are living on those rock faces. And I've shown this photo before, but I always want to keep showing it, because when do you see a bear on a cliff like that? That's like Yosemite and climbing people. And we've never seen them fall. They're trying to get up the cliffs and get things like, that's a honey. They're trying to get honey, they're trying to get snails. And this is an example of just what their habitat looks like. So I have to say our heart skips a few beats when we're watching this, especially the cubs, 3 months old. You can probably hear our heartbeats in the video if you listen hard enough. So she's trying to get some snails that are in an underhang there. You can see her trying to pull them off. But they do spend a lot of rest and downtime in the day. It's so hot. It goes up to 115 degrees Fahrenheit, and so it's hard for them to move, and it's hard for us to move. So our field staff tend to follow suit with the bears. But we have a couple of oases in this dry forest, and you can see there's a small green dot in the middle, and that's actually a small waterhole. That's a fig tree, when there's a little tiny waterhole that the bears are using to drink, and it's keeping all of the animals alive in this forest. You can imagine how great that feels. 115, 120 degrees, a couple of liters of water. So in the dry forest, they're actually feeding on two main food sources. This is the sapote fruit. It's a small fruit about the size of an avocado, and it's bright orange on the inside, and it's a thick, it's very similar to an avocado texture. It's high in calories, high in fat. And the great thing about this is as the bears walk through the forest, they're leaving the seed, which is actually regenerating the forest. So they're planting the forest and keeping that endangered, actually it's critically endangered plant alive. Unfortunately, the people and the locals need this wood as well. This is what they're cooking on. And so without this plant, they have no way of cooking. So it's a challenge for conservation, it's a challenge for us. This is another food that they're eating. It's called the Paseo Tree. So you would wonder if they're related to the beaver, but they are not. Although this tree, they eat the entire tree. They don't just eat the bark around it, they eat the entire tree. And it looks like that when they're finished. Just absolutely destroyed. So here's a quick video, just so you can see how hard it is. This is a cub. The mom has already opened up the tree for her, and she's just pulling bits and pieces out as she can. Could you imagine that in that kind of heat, a dry piece of wood for lunch? And this is their winter food, and the sapote is their summer food. So this is what they're eating all year round, other than those snails. So you can see why it's worth going down those cliffs to try to get a little snail. The great thing about the sapote, or the Paseo tree, as you can see, even though it's been completely destroyed by the bears, it actually starts growing again. So they're not destroying the forest. What we've really struggled with the last 10 years is land trafficking. That's been a huge problem for us, and you can see in this photo, this is just outside of our conservation center. The land mafias have been stealing land, dividing it up and selling it to people from other regions. So as you can imagine, having our organization there and working with the locals to try to create protected areas is not something they wanted. So 10 years, 8 lawsuits, it's been pretty challenging. And it did get heated for a while when they started killing some of our bears and hanging little bear parts at some of our base camps. So that was a tough time. But I have a great team, as you can see here. So we were able to start a conservation center and start working with the local people and try to protect this area. And I'm happy to say that 2 of the main mafia leaders are in jail for 25 years. So we have enjoyed the last couple of years. Thank you. So in the last couple of years, we've been able to start working more directly with the local community, and we've joined with San Diego Zoo and also Nature and Culture International to work on an education program, working with the schools, trying to replant some of the areas that have been destroyed. And thanks to WCN, we've now been able to move up to the higher elevations and work with the Quechua, which are an indigenous community in the high mountains at about 4,000 meters, so 13,000 feet. So we've been teaching them about bears and getting them engaged into wildlife. And thanks to Shivani and some of her kids' programs with Iwasu Lions, we began an education program with our rescued horses. So we've been bringing, just a few months ago, we actually brought some of the local indigenous people who've never left their communities before down to the dry forest and taught them about the bears in the dry forest, horses, and got them more engaged with some of the rescued animals that we have there. Another really important part of our program has been the Felty. I'm sure many of you have seen them at the table, and thank you also who have purchased them. But this is an alternative livelihood program, and this is what allows us to work in these areas. But not only that, it's providing some type of income for many of the women who have no jobs and who are able to help educate a few more of their children. So we've been making 6,000 to 8,000 products a year, and now getting them into stores and selling them at events like this. We're trying to really promote it for Christmas. And again, thanks to WCN, we were able to move up again into the highlands. So just last month, we started a new workshop with indigenous women who speak Quechua, not Spanish. So we've had to have a translator. And this is them just making their first little product. So we're hoping this will be successful as we move into new territories. But working with these ladies has allowed us access into this incredible habitat. This is really pristine Paramo that's been untouched, undisturbed by mining, but is actually under land tenure for mining. So we are working rapidly to try to prevent anything from taking place. So working with the community is essential, and we've been working with them, getting some cameras out just to try to understand what's actually up there. Are there bears? I mean, some of the locals have said they've seen bears, but there's another animal that looks similar to a bear. And then we put a few cameras out, got a couple of shots, and we have now identified a new population of bears. So we're really excited about that. And not only that, we found a mountain tapir, which is an incredible animal, and it's thought that there's only a few hundred left in Peru, so we're really excited that we not only will be protecting bears, but we'll be protecting other species. And I just wanted to throw this in because I think tapirs are so adorable, and this is their little baby with their markings. So unfortunately, after last year's expo, we all left pumped and positive, but when I got back to Peru, these were the photos we were getting from our camera traps, and we had serious fires. And that's the first time in the high elevation that we have had such a drought. And I'm sure people from California can relate to that. But it just went crazy. And unfortunately, the government was not prepared, and they were unable to send any support. So our cameras were melted, and some of our field staff were out there. They worked with the community. We rounded as many people as we could. We actually had over 200 people, got them with shovels, and I mean, we don't have a lot of water, but they started digging, cutting, trying to build breaks between the fires, and we were actually able to put them out, but we did lose 30,000 hectares, so that's a lot of land in a small area. So unfortunately, this is a lot of what our habitat looks like now. And that's a photo from October last year and then November, so just charcoaled. And this is one of the species that's actually related to, it's vaccinium, it's related to the blueberry, and this was an incredible area just covered in blueberries. And so now these bears are looking for new food sources, which has caused retaliatory killings. And that's something we've never had to contend with in the past, but unfortunately this year there's been a number of bears killed. They're leaving this area and they're walking down into the cornfields trying to find anything to eat because they don't have any food now. So we're having to deal with conflict, but at the same time, these people need their farm fields and they need to eat as well. So it's always a challenge. And when we thought the fires were over and we could get back to our work and life would carry on, we come back down to our conservation center, and an El Nino, a rare El Nino, kicks in. Normally we have a year advance, but this was a coastal El Nino, and our conservation center and field site were underwater, and our staff housing collapsed. and we lost more camera traps in Waterfall since we put a lot of our camera traps in dry riverbeds, so this is just outside of our conservation center. Unfortunately, people think, well, that's great, at least you have water and there's a drought, and I imagine water for the dry forest is excellent, but in fact, it's not always great, and it's not great for bears. While it looks beautiful and it transforms the landscape, the sapote that I talked about earlier here, you can see that there's a green coating over top of the sapote, and what actually happens is it prevents it from pollinating, and there's no sapote left for the bears to eat. So again, the females aren't able to lactate and feed their cubs, and the cubs either starve to death, or this is a photo of a female just passing saliva to try to keep her cub alive. So it's pretty challenging, and this is what the bears end up looking like. So it's hard to watch. But the good news, everybody here, and with all the support, we can keep these bears alive and in the wild and try to keep this little bear cub that's only 6 weeks living in the wild. We are in desperate need of camera traps, and we need to get out into new areas and try to figure out where these bears are. This is a whole new territory for us dealing with this conflict. They've moved out of the areas that have burned, and we need to find where they are. We need to monitor them, try to understand what's happening up there. And if we're not losing our camera traps to floods and fires, we have these curious bears to contend with that also like to eat camera traps. So this is Marco the bear. He's too lazy to walk to the camera. Like he's got nothing better to do here. And this is a special camera we got from BBC, a nice SLR camera too, so. So you can see why we need camera traps. But at the same time, we'd really appreciate any support for our Felty program. If people have any ideas of where we could sell this, or anyone wants to put on any events and try to get them into local stores or sell them for Christmas, we'd really appreciate it. So, and to end on a good positive note, because I know it seemed like one thing after the other of not such amazing news, we have a really amazing news to announce. And this year is the first time that the Peruvian government has put an animal onto the money. It's always been archaeology. And not only did they put an animal on the money, we were able to get them to put Laura, our bear, and also a spectacle bear. So this is a really exciting moment. And we have a couple at our table for purchase as well. And so now we are excited to say that Laura's legacy will live on, at least on the money. And I had to add a photo. This is our next little bear conservation, so that's my daughter, Kalea. Anyways, thanks very much for coming. Do you have time for questions? Okay. We have time for questions?
Yeah, we have time
Becca?
for questions.
Hi. So I noticed that the Quechua textiles were really beautiful. Can they make things for you that you could sell those to? Those are really lovely.
Oh, the textiles?
Yeah.
Yeah, we've actually been working with them. We do have stuff at our tables.
Uh-huh.
We sell little bags and purses and things and some of their products. The problem is with Peru especially is that the market is so saturated for a lot of the woven products, which is why we're trying to come up with something that's different and new and that we can sell a lot more of. Ideally, all we're trying to do is create more jobs. So we're hoping to have a couple hundred people working up at the Highlands in the next few years. So, but yes, we do have lots over there if you want to check it out. Thanks.
So we've seen these lush forests of Peru, and why do these bears choose the dry forest? Is that their natural habitat, or have they moved into that area because of some odd reason?
That's a very good question that I don't think I can actually answer. I mean, we don't really know unless we started looking at them genetically how long they've been down there for. Have they been pushed down out of there, down into the dry forest because of habitat fragmentation? Everyone thinks it's such an extreme area and why would there be bears there? But to be honest, in my personal opinion from what I've seen, other than the effect from humans and the cutting of the sapote tree, between the sapote and the paseo, they actually do really well. It's really their lack of access to sapote and not allowing them to get fat enough, especially females. So I think it's a great habitat personally, and I imagine in the past that they probably lived down there as well, and there was other foods that used to be there. So, but scientifically, we don't actually know the answer to that. But good question.
Hi. In the case of this massive habitat destruction due to the fire, is there anything that you can do to like directly support the population, or is ethically that's not something you can get involved with?
In terms of reintroducing or
Like supporting with other
With
food
food?
sources or anything like that?
It's hard to know until we actually know where they've gone to and how long it's going to take for that area to rejuvenate. I mean, the one thing is that they're not trees that have been destroyed that they're eating. It is blueberry, and so there could be just a year or two. So it's really working with the communities to not shoot them. But we're not really sure, and that's something. I mean, this is all new for us, so we're just looking at that now. So.
Can you tell the difference from each of the bears?
We can. Very good question. We can. Do you remember seeing their little facial markings? So each one has a very different one. So we actually have names for every single one of the bears. So it's kind of fun naming them, actually. We use different little events with the community and depending somebody important at the time. But yeah, we can tell each one of them. So that was Marco who was being funny in those videos.
How much does a regular camera trap cost, usually?
They're around $500 to $600 for the camera trap, and so we're actually trying to get up to 100 camera traps right now. So we lost a lot in the fires. So.
In the future, do you guys plan to maybe like tag bears, you know, with like collars, tracking collars, keep like a population under like really watchful eye or something like a project like that?
We actually did that. We were actually the first organization to put GPS collars on. So we did that the first 5 years, and that was really to understand their range, their use. But to be honest, the fact that we can see them and that we've got a field team that basically lives in the field, we just monitor them and we identify them. So we have a pretty good idea. And then as long as we have the camera traps running, it's really invasive to collar them. It's not something, I think a lot of people think, oh, that's really awesome to be able to do that. And while it's fun to be able to touch the animal, it puts them at risk. And so unless we really have to, we don't. It takes a lot of effort. It did take a couple of months to get each bear collared. So right now, our work with the camera traps is working well. So yeah.
How did you choose the Andean bear to study?
Good question. So I studied black bears for my master's, and I actually really wanted to go to South America. But when I went to the bear conferences, there was a lot of presentations on panda bears, polar bears, black bears, grizzly bears, and I was actually quite ignorant. I didn't even realize there was 8 bear species in the world, but there's 4 more that people know so little about, and so that really interested me as a scientist, but also as a conservationist. I felt that that's something I could contribute to. So it was pretty naive at the time. I just went down to Peru thinking, oh, I'm going to go find some bears and start doing my PhD. So that's why my PhD has taken a long time to finish. But they are a beautiful animal, and they are my favorite.
Now, if you get the new camera traps, do you have a plan for where to put them to try to, since they were in the riverbeds, is it okay?
Yeah, it's actually moving up, so it's actually outside of the area. We've actually, luckily, we've been working for the last year with all the communities. The communities have to give you permission to go into the land. The land is not actually owned by the federal government. So we have a student right now that's back in Canada working on her master's. So hopefully, and with San Diego Zoo, who's also been helping us with some of the study design, we can put something together and get those camera traps out as soon as possible over a much larger area. So what we've tended to do in the past, just because our budget's been so low, is we've had small amounts of cameras and we keep moving them, but it takes a really long time and we can't look at what we need to. And I think at the high elevation, these bears are using a much larger area, and it's hard to cover that with a small amount of cameras. So.
So can you tell us it's the smallest bear species I understand?
The sun bear is actually the smallest.
Oh, is it?
Yeah.
Okay. So how big are the bears? At what altitudes do they range from, in the low to the high points? And it's a little bit of the natural history of them.
Yeah. So the population in the dry forests are actually really quite small, and I think that's for a number of reasons. I wouldn't want to be climbing those cliffs with a huge amount of weight. So the ones that we actually immobilized and collared weighed, the females were around 50 kilos, and the males were around 100 kilos. But at higher elevations, we're not sure, but they looked a lot bigger and a lot rounder. So I think, and they live in a lot colder environment, so it would make sense that they're bigger. And then their range, the dry forest is 200 meters up to 400 meters. So we're basically at sea level, right up to about 13,000 feet, and they're in that entire range. So it's pretty interesting because the ecosystems change so dramatically, yet it's the same species. So it's going to be really interesting to look at the difference between these bears in the cloud forest and the bears in the dry forest, which is what we're trying to look at now.
I know there's a couple more questions for Robyn, and I know Jorgelina didn't get a full round of questions either, so we may bring her back up as well, and if you have any more questions about Ethiopian wolves, you're welcome to ask those as well.
I was fascinated with. Oh, here?
No, work. Hello. Thank you. So you said that it's easy to follow. You don't have to use collars for the dry forest bears, I guess, because you can see them and you can know the markings. Is that true also for in the high altitudes where there's a lot more forest? Isn't it a lot harder to follow them and see where they go?
Yeah, that's a good question. It's actually, it will be, and that's something we're looking at right now. So what we found so far, and this is new for us, we've just started working up there in the last year, is our field team has been out there. They basically live in the field, and it's Padamo, which is an open grassland, and then it's forested area. And so up in the Padamo, we're thinking they use it at a certain time of year, and then they're in the forest at a certain time of year. So they're coming in and coming out. And so as long as we're up in the area, the open area, so that's what we've been doing basically, is having our field teams up there and observing them. But if there is certain, maybe females that don't come out of the forest when they have a cub, then we're going to start having some bias in our data. But that's where we're hoping the camera traps will fill in. So as long as we have enough camera traps in that forest, which is also challenging to put out, then we should be able to identify them without and know actually how they're using the range. So
one of the things that I find fascinating is that you're a PhD student, but you're doing community development, you're doing land use allocation and all these different things. So then what was the original focus of your PhD work, and how does that sort of influence what you're doing now and what you want to do in the future?
So my PhD is actually in the dry forest. It's not in the cloud forest. So I just actually finished a paper on reproduction. Reproduction has been a huge challenge, and that's actually why we think we're losing much of the bear population in the south, or in the lower elevations. In the future, what we're really interested in looking at is land use, how the bears are actually using their habitat. Does that change seasonally? Food. So that's another chapter that I haven't even got to yet, but I'm going to be looking at how the bears are using how they're using the landscape. The reason we have to do a lot of the community work is, as I mentioned before, the land is not owned by the federal government, and while it's an endangered species, and the federal government does in fact own the animals, they don't own the land, and so we can't get into the land without the people. So we have to work with them to actually access the land, and you can't just, they're pretty sensitive, especially because there's been such conflict with mining mafias and so on, and so we have to build a trust, which takes a really long time. You can't just walk in and say, hey, I'm a biologist, and especially because I'm from Canada, a lot of the mining companies are Canadian, so they're suspicious right off the bat, so it takes a while to build those relationships. So we've been doing that for years, even though we hadn't started working up in those areas yet. So, and hopefully my PhD is going to be finished soon. I can see Matthias laughing back there. He's working with me, and I'm trying to publish a paper for 2 years with him. So.
Is the Waterhole the only place that they can drink?
Actually, that is a very good question, because it's not. And so we thought it was. There's only 5 water holes in our whole study area. But we found and realized that once the females have their babies, they don't go to the water holes, and they are able to survive more than 6 months eating cactus. So they were able to get enough water from that. So I should have mentioned that. That's a great question. So I wouldn't want to eat cactus, but.
Okay, I have a question. Are there any bears in the United States acting as ambassadors, i.e. in a good environment like the San Diego Zoo?
Do you mean in captivity?
Captivity.
Not really. We've been working with the San Diego Zoo more on an educational front and with the research design, but we haven't actually worked with many zoos from having them in captivity. That's something, an area that we probably could open up a little bit more. What's that? Well, we actually did, one thing we did, we had the, one of the head vet from the San Diego Zoo come down with us and help with some of the immobilizations. The one thing she did, she did realize is that maybe the bears in captivity were a little bit fat. So she did put them on a diet when she got back.
How about one more question for Robyn, or if there are any for Ethiopian wolves? Back here? Okay.
My question is about the Ethiopian wolves. I understand there's a little bit of ecotourism developing in the highlands there, centered around wildlife conservation and observation. Are you finding that of value to build support for conservation in the area?
Yes, is this working? Yes. Actually, tourism is supporting the community-based conservation areas and is driving those initiatives. And I used to be a skeptic about that because in many places people talk about ecotourism as the salvation, and sometimes there are expectations that are created that then are not fulfilled and that can fire back. But in areas that are close to other, for example, to the Lalibela, where the rock churches are, where many tourists go, there is a population nearby, and so the tourists are coming up to the mountain, and the communities are benefiting, and they really see a value on the Afro-Alpine and on the wolves when there is tourism. So I think, if anything, the tourism will continue growing, because also Ethiopia is opening new roads, and maybe people will want to go to more remote places. So I do see a role on that. On the other hand, in the Simien Mountain National Parks, which is the park that is most visited in Ethiopia, we're concerned that the tourists are disturbing the wolves in some ways. So we are going to explore that. But I think there is potential for that, and we are hopeful.
Thank you. And one more question. Sounds like burning one over there.
So, this is for the Ethiopian wolves.
Yes.
So what if you find there is a litter of cubs, but then when you're looking around the place where you found it, there's a bunch of dead wolves. A bunch of dead wolves.
So what is the question? I missed the question.
Okay, I'm going to repeat it. So, if you find a litter of Ethiopian wolves, but then babies, but then you find out that there's a lot of other dead wolves nearby where there is the babies, what do you do?
With orphan Ethiopian wolves.
Yeah. Well, yes. You know, it can happen that it depends when the wolves get infected. Sometimes if they die and when they have puppies, I think the puppies may struggle. It didn't happen exactly at that time, but it happened around that time. So I think probably the puppies will not survive if the mom is dead. So that is another problem.
Let's have one more round of applause for Jorgelina and Robyn.